Almost everyone knows who the femme fatale is. She's an alluring, mysterious woman, typically dressed in dark clothing, and has dangerous schemes in mind. She's basically everything girl bloggers want to be. The femme fatale is defined as a darkly seductive woman who leads her unsuspecting lovers into their downfall. There's kind of the golden retriever versus black cat energy discussions going on, and I'm not sure how long it's going to last, but it does reflect on the interest in the femme fatale and the desire to become her. Media portrayals of these dangerous women have a strong link to how women's rights and freedoms have changed throughout time. This trope within itself has walked a fine line between empowering and sexist, and it's a curiosity if we even need this type of character today. This video does include spoilers, so watch at your own risk. We're going to look into how the femme fatale has evolved in pop culture, and what these characters say about social fears throughout time. So now, let's get started. The femme fatale archetype has existed since ancient times in various cultures. For instance, Lilith rebelled against Adam, choosing independence over him. Subsequently, Eve tempted Adam into ending harmony in the Garden of Eden. Mahini used her charms to mesmerize both gods and demons. Medusa was villainized for her beauty and was punished for it. And Salome was very seductive, while also willing to cause harm for her mother's vengeful wishes. All of these figures are depicted as symbols of rebellion, especially since they were linked to the demise of men who were formerly in positions of power. For centuries, the femme fatale was written as cautionary tales to not succumb to desires, and would become even more popular during the Romantic period of the 19th century. The Gothic novel, The Monk, written by Matthew Gregory Lewis, tells a story of a young woman being a servant to a monk, but encourages him to partake in sinful activities with the help of black magic. This character would inspire works by Edgar Allan Poe and the novel Camilla, which would become the inspiration for Dracula. This type of seductive character was also prevalent in various operas and paintings, and regularly presented with a villainous nature. Given that this was the Victorian era, a time where very strict gender roles were enforced, works that involved dangerous women were especially shocking, sometimes even displayed with eroticism. It didn't take long for femme fatales to be shown on screen. Theda Bara, who was one of the biggest stars of the silent period, was typecasted as a vamp who loved to manipulate men into moral destruction. Theda Bara was a relatively controversial figure, in which she stated, "I will continue doing vampires as long as people sin." During the Second World War, to make up for labor shortages while men were overseas, a growing number of women were visible in professional workspaces, particularly in industrial labor. Though women working outside of home were regarded as necessary and even patriotic, there were still some anxieties around changing gender norms, which would soon be reflected in cinema. After experimentations with different film techniques and influenced by detective fiction, 1940s cinema was known as the era of the film noir, or dark film. A lot of these movies were stylized crime dramas that featured a lot of smoking, and showcased a modern take on the femme fatale. While many prior Hollywood films showed female characters as either virtuous or evil, femme fatales were morally complex. These characters were more than just potential wives and mothers. They were calculated, alluring, and confident in their sensuality. These characters that challenged social norms were intended to be scandalous as well as intriguing. The Maltese Falcon popularized the femme fatale in film noir, where a woman assumes a false identity. Phyllis Dietrichson, in Double Indemnity, is one of the most notable dangerous women in Hollywood's golden age. This film has her manipulating a man into unaliving her husband for financial gain. To note, her first appearance has her wearing a towel. While femme fatales typically desire money, Ellen Burnett in Leave Her to Heaven is an already wealthy socialite who falls pregnant, but feels that motherhood and marriage would be too stifling for her. She has an unhealthy jealousy towards her husband, and manipulates anyone who gets in her way. She has to appease her all-consuming ego. The Big Sleep focuses on a private detective who is enticed by a mysterious woman whose intentions with him are unclear. She just has fun playing with his emotions. An even more frightful character was in The Postman Always Rings Twice, in which a woman poised to unalive her wealthy husband with the help of her side piece. Infidelity is central to the plot of Gilda, where a man accuses her of being unfaithful to her husband because of her flirtatious and bold nature. But it turns out that she never did anything wrong. She only acted the way she did to mess with him. Legendary. The dangerous women of the movie world represented a fantasy of glamour during a time of rationing and aesthetic limitations. The skin-bearing little black dress worn by Rita Hayworth was one of the most famous movie outfits of the decade. Along with being fashion icons, femme fatales opened the doors for complex, imperfect female characters who weren't set to live conventional lives. They were a particular fantasy for women audiences, where they can see their inner dark sides presented on screen. While these characters were very manipulative, their actions were typically driven by survival or revenge. It's hard to say that they were fully bad, like how everyone around them isn't fully good. One femme fatale that marked an end of an era was the character Rose Loomis in Niagara, released in 1953. Niagara was criticized for being a morbid, cliched expedition into lust and murder. Not to mention that many critics of the time focused on Marilyn Monroe's outfits as much as the story. By this point, it became apparent that the film noir and the femme fatale was fading away. One big reason for this was the post-war movement of domesticity for women, and with how influential Alfred Hitchcock was becoming in the thriller genre. Many female characters in his works were representatives of the Ice Queen trope. They were written as composed and mysterious, but weren't outright villains. His representations of female characters have been criticized for being underwritten objects of desire, where they simply become acquired by male protagonists. On top of that, he was allegedly creepily obsessed with the lead actresses in his films. It's super weird, but anyways, while femme fatale characters were becoming less visible on screen, in real life, emerging social movements were changing the world. Second wave feminism challenged gender roles and highlighted discrimination in the workplace. There was also increased awareness of the importance of women continuing their formal education. Starting in the late 1970s, there was a sharp increase in women attending college, and because of this, more women were working in higher paying jobs compared to previous generations. And in the tradition of things getting better for formerly marginalized groups, there was a wave of backlash against it. One of the reflections of fearing the independent working woman was the return of femme fatales in popular media. As relations outside of marriage were becoming more commonplace, dangerous women were mostly presented in the very popular erotic thriller genre. While films such as Body Heat and Blue Velvet showed a modernized take on femme fatales, the massively popular Fatal Attraction was a cultural phenomenon. The story follows a successful lawyer with a wife and family, whose life turns upside down after having an affair. The character Alex Forrest is single and financially independent. While at the beginning, she comes across as cool and seductive, but as the film progresses, it's revealed that she's obsessive, doesn't accept any sort of boundaries, and displays symptoms of erotomania, which is a rare paranoid condition where someone delusionally believes that someone else is in love with them. Though she wasn't made to represent all working women, Alex Forrest symbolizes the cultural fears of women gaining independence. The ending was even refilmed to appeal to test audiences that wanted to see her suffer. According to Backlash, written by Susie Faludi, she was branded by tabloids as the most hated woman in America, while also reinvigorating marriages, slowing the adultery rate, and encouraging more responsible behavior from singles. Fatal Attraction is known to not have aged well, particularly its representation of personality disorders and mental illnesses. Given that Fatal Attraction was the second most lucrative movie of 1987, characters similar to Alex Forrest were the latest cinematic trend. The erotic thriller would become even more explicit with Basic Instinct. The plot focuses on whether or not a mysterious writer unalived her husband using an ice pick of all things. On top of everything, she's also bi, which was seen as edgy for the time. This movie was a prime example of the newly popular neo-noir genre. While Basic Instinct has the format of a 1940s film noir, the visuals are sleek and modern, and has a lot of gratuitous nudity. It was almost going to be rated NC-17, and about 40 seconds had to be cut out to give it a safer R rating. The character Catherine Trammell is written as a highly intelligent pathological liar, all with a classic film noir essence. Dangerous women in the neo-noir genre prevailed, such as Bridget Gregory in The Last Seduction, Lynn Bracken in LA Confidential, and Ginger Knowles in Swordfish. In the new millennium, femme fatales were characters that the audience can admire and sympathize with. These characters were typically motivated by revenge, and who doesn't love a good revenge plot? One famous example of the femme fatale gone girl blogger was Jennifer's Body. Jennifer Check suffers from the horrors of self-objectification. At the beginning, she likes to believe that she's in full control of everything, with the help of seduction. But deep down, she's terribly insecure. All the value she puts on herself is based on her body, largely due to how others don't see past her appearance. Her best friend Needy, on the other hand, acknowledges and admires Jennifer's humanity. It's regularly hinted that she's in love with her, despite being in a toxic friendship. Jennifer is pretty much the declared leader of the two. Her manipulative personality is already apparent, but her desire for control is expedited when she undergoes a supernatural transformation. After getting sacrificed by a weirdo indie band, she becomes a succubus. To quench her hunger, she uses her charms and powers to have guys fall into her trap. She is a god. Needy knows that something is going on with her friend, but falls in Jennifer's manipulation trap again when they share a kiss. In a deleted scene, Needy confronts Jennifer for her vampiric rituals. Jennifer sees nothing wrong with what she's done because she's not unaliving people, she's unaliving boys. Something needs to be done before prom starts, since that place is going to be an all-you-can-eat buffet for her. After an eventful finale where she flies, or just hovers, Needy soon defeats the evil her best friend has become, but not without plotting some revenge for the weird indie band that started this in the first place. This movie is written to be a feminist film, with the main focus being on what is horrifying for girls. It can be interpreted that Jennifer Check is regularly objectified by the guys around her, and subconsciously sees herself as they see her. But after being targeted for a sacrifice, again seen as nothing but a body, she's gifted with evil powers, and undergoes a revenge plot where she sees guys as pieces of meat. She feels no remorse for her actions, and if called out, she'll use her powers of manipulation to her advantage. This movie helped catapult Femme Fatale characters with understandable motivations and are out for payback. After Jennifer Check, Amy Dunn would be the dangerous woman of a new generation. After years of trying to be a perfect, reasonable wife, her relationship with her husband deteriorates after the 2008 financial crash. She even moves from her New York City environment to a mundane suburb. She tried to accept these changes, but her husband Nick still betrayed her by cheating. After this, Amy forms an elaborate plan for her husband to be publicly disparaged. He doesn't get to win. Her strategic and devious nature has finally been revealed in one of the biggest plot twists from any movie. Amy was out for pure payback and refused to be a victim. Her plan was so perfectly calculated that she had the media and the nationwide public to be on her side. She even causes violence and gets away with it. Though at the end, she continues her marriage. She proves to Nick that she is not one to be messed with. Gone Girl is one of the rare instances where the femme fatale isn't punished in the end. Some viewers are captivated by her. Her cool girl monologue is one of legends. A big factor of Nick and Amy's marital issues was that Nick pretended to be someone he wasn't to be closer to Amy, while Amy made an inauthentic persona to keep this relationship. While femme fatales typically are created as cautionary tales, the story tells the dangers of not being who you are. On screen, femme fatale characters continue to be visible, though the narratives have evolved. It's been debated for some time on what the femme fatale represents, and whether or not these depictions of dangerous and seductive women are sexist. My answer to that is it depends on the context. The femme fatale is regarded as a feared character because she's not only attractive, but is aware of it, and uses that to her advantage. As a result, femme fatale characters tend to be very actualized. How they look are intrinsic parts of their character, in which the camera may or may not linger on their bodies. For decades, that's been commonplace for all types of female characters, but femme fatales are depicted with a sense of agency that, at worst, comes across as inauthentic. Given that these characters are typically uninterested in being mothers or getting married, those are reasons why they're deemed untrustworthy and dangerous, which have led to female characters who are more independent to be representations of social fears. This trope being sexist or not largely depends on the thematic goals of the writers and director. For example, the director of Fatal Attraction has given some interesting insights on how he perceives women who are financially independent upon its release. But it is important to note that the writers intended for Alex Forrest to be a complex character. The femme fatale's complexity gives room for women in media to be imperfect, as they're only representing their character, not people in real life. In some contexts, the femme fatale can be empowering, since they're typically written to be confident, intelligent, and ahead of everyone else's game. She doesn't let social rules, or basically anyone, to determine what she wants to do, even if she might be shunned for it. This character was created by social anxieties, and if just doing what you please causes all this controversy, there is some power within that. As for whether or not modern cinema has space for the femme fatale, I'm not against still seeing characters like these. Whether they're genuinely evil or simply misunderstood could reflect the inner dark sides of the viewers. Femme fatales are thematic outsiders, and similarly to Elphaba and Wicked, it would be fun to embrace the villain role and question if they are truly evil or have been portrayed that way. Ideally, their goals would be more than just focusing on a guy, but character motivations depend on wherever the story takes us. I would say that right now, this character type isn't very intersectional, but that might change in the future. This trope aligns with real-life women's rights and independence. Her self-assured stance against social norms have led to her being somewhat of an aspirational character. Some social media content explains how you can evoke femme fatale energy, but only the positive aspects of the trope, which include confidence, dressing nicely, being well-spoken, and understanding the power that you hold. Not everyone might want to be a femme fatale, but sometimes it can be good to be a teeny bit bad. Thank you all for watching, and hope to see you all in the next one.